what is my business worth? What are the risks in my business? And just have that conversation, because then I can make choices about how do I want to plan my future and my wealth. And it's not about exiting, it's about creating options.
John, why don't you tell everyone who you are? Here we go with John Andrade.
Yeah, John Andrade.
The host of the Go For CEO podcast, John Andrade.
From equipment finance to acquisition of a business.
Where did this book idea come from, and why did you just launch it?
Well, there's 4 pillars that I, on my day-to-day, look for. Here's where I want to go. Here's where I want to be. How do I multiply myself in action? I started to convert that into a story and understanding. And hopefully that's the goal, is to leave that legacy.
All right. Hey, most entrepreneurs spend decades building their businesses, but very few actually build them to exit. And when the time finally comes to sell, many owners realize something painful. The business they worked on their entire life for isn't really worth nearly what they thought. Today, I'm joined by Erin Guthrie of Exit Factor, who works directly with business owners to increase the value of their companies long before they ever think about selling. Because the best exits don't happen by accident. They're actually designed. Welcome to the Go For CEO channel, Erin. How are you?
Good. Thanks, John, for having me. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, I know we met at a function locally here in the Chicagoland area. And if you're watching this Go For CEO channel, many of you have not subscribed yet. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Check out the book, the Go For CEO, the 4A formula. Don't mention my book the right way. So, but excited to have you on. We had a quick conversation and I said, man, I'd love to have you on because I think this is such a vital piece that people, especially in the small to medium-sized business, right? Enterprise level and, core middle market, large middle market companies usually get the assistance from these, consulting companies or consulting firms and all that. But really the SMBs, right? We live in this space and I'm a commercial banker in that space that leads to education in the way that we do things. So we like to start typically, you own a franchise in the Exit Factor, brand. Would love to find out where you came from, what was kind of your background, maybe family, entrepreneurship, or those types of things, and a little bit about just kind of what made you land on Exit Factor as the brand that you now, run for your own franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my background is I've spent my career in the technology world. So early on, I was in the Bay Area. I came out to the Midwest to get my graduate degree. And ever since then, I've been in tech. I've been working in strategy and M&A for 15 years. So what that means is I sat on the buy side. So I looked at a lot of different ways to grow the business at large companies. So we looked at acquisitions, we looked at partnerships, we looked at product growth, and all the ways we could invest. And in doing that, I found a lot of things that we said no to. And I really loved learning that pattern recognition of what makes a great business to invest in and what makes something a good buy. And as I left corporate and started at Exit Factor, one thing I'm really excited about and passionate about is working with owners and creating generational wealth and helping them preserve the legacy that they've created behind them. And so having come from that buyer side and being able to take that buyer lens, I can now translate that for owners and help them think about, hey, what does it really mean? What is a buyer looking for when they evaluate a business, and give them that perspective so that they can take that into their own world and make decisions. And then on a more personal note, I have a family member who has owned a business, founded the business, run it for many years, and has had some different experiences in thinking about, should I sell? Should I transfer this business? And ultimately, I think it's just something that, having gone through that with this family member, realized that planning earlier would have been maybe the way to go. And so I really want to be able to spread that word and help folks get started a bit earlier so that they have time to have more options in their future.
I think it's really interesting, right? So you took the opposite side of a transaction and created a business out of it with a brand that is out there helping that opposite side, right? So it's pretty unique in that sense, because a lot of times, when you think about a business like, oh, I'm a great cook at home, I'm going to be a chef, right? Or I'm a great plumber, so I'm going to start my own plumbing business, right? So I love that you took the opposite, because now that lens is so true, right, in your consultancy effort to be able to educate that small to medium-sized business owners. So, all right, so look, you had this corporate kind of background, you have this M&A side, and like you said, on the buy side, I guess what were two or three things that you said to yourself, okay, well, I'm in corporate, I've got bigger purse strings, we got to evaluate so many deals, right? What led that then to say, okay, well, I think there's a gap, because, entrepreneurship is all about, providing solutions to problems. So where did you find that kind of aha moment for yourself?
Yeah, well, it was really through my own research and studying as I saw a lot of my own peers who are my age start to be interested in potentially buying a business and wanting to do that as their own path to creating their future. And as those peers began looking at leaving corporate to buy a business, I realized that a lot of the businesses they were evaluating actually weren't ready to be bought. So, for example, if folks on your podcast have heard of a search fund, what that is when somebody looks at a large number of businesses, maybe 1,000, and considers buying them. And so some of my peers were doing that and not being able to find something to buy. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I started doing some research, and I found that there's a huge wave of folks in the boomer generation who are retiring right now. And there's about to be about $1 trillion of economic value handed from one generation to the next. So it's just this huge opportunity of business owners who are getting ready to retire, getting ready to go on to the next thing. And there's all these young people who want to take over these businesses, but there's a gap in the sense that sometimes the founders haven't maybe prepared the business in the best way for them to hand over the keys to the next generation. So as I started doing more research, I realized, hey, there's an opportunity to help make this handoff really positive and keep the business in the local economy, make sure that these jobs stay here and that people get to continue their legacy. So I just thought that was a really exciting opportunity to be part of.
It's interesting too. There was probably a 2-year window, 22 to 24, where I got an onslaught of PE guys and M&A guys calling me, and gals calling me like, "Hey man, I want to buy a plumbing business. I want to buy a construction, but I want to buy this." And there's a lot of financing of purchasing through SBA and some other creative finance tools. But the interesting part is that dichotomy, right? I mean, as a buyer, you kind of want to buy it at the best possible, price to bring a faster return and your ROI and all that good stuff, right? But from a lens of a seller, you're trying to maximize the value. So, how have you, I guess you had the aha moment to see where these, baby boomers and this $1 trillion transfer is happening. But is the game in that sense, or the thesis of this business, is it to be able to then measurably take, a current business that might sell in its current condition at 1 million, I'm just throwing a number out there, to 1.3, 1.7? Is there something measurable that, I guess, that's the foundation of kind of what you're working with these companies for?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So usually what'll happen is an owner will have a number in mind. Actually, every owner has their number. Even if they don't
Mm.
know their number, what we do is we help them get a valuation and understand if you were going to list your business today, what would the market bear? And keep in mind that out of every 10 deals, 8 out of 10 are a private buyer, meaning not a private equity firm, not an investment bank, not a large corporation. So it's going to be an individual buying that business. And so that means it's kind of an open market. And so it's really important for owners to understand what's that valuation number, what's that sticker price, and also what are they going to find out during diligence. And the diligence is kind of like when you sell a home and the inspector comes and like flips on all the lights on and off and they poke around and find everything wrong with it. What are you going to find during diligence that someone might kind of take off numbers from your deal price? So we give that to the owner. We say, look, let's say your valuation today is $1 million. Well, after you sell, there's also going to be taxes and you're going to net X number of dollars. How does that sound to you? And by the way, there's also these risks in your operations. So you might even net even fewer dollars than that. So the owner can think about it and say, well, I actually thought my number was going to be more like 2.5. Like, okay, great. that's information, right? Now we have options. Now we have time and runway to make decisions and think about what do we want to fix to help you grow? And then we can think about, all right, is it a profitability issue? Is it that the owner is too dependent on the owner and they're running all of the sales in the business? Do we need to grow the business and add new customers? It just gives us information up front. And then every single year we'll do that evaluation again and we'll measure it again, right? To know, all right, last year maybe we measured out $1 million. Next year we're tracking at 1.7. Next year we're tracking at 2.5. So we can kind of continuously take stock and see what the market will bear if they go to sell it again.
Okay. So, and is there a process of benchmarking certain industry or all industries? I mean, I guess, are there, have you seen over the last, 5, 10 years, some differences, right? Maybe some industries start dropping and, the evaluations go down and also for people that don't know, from a banking perspective, it's always a multiple, right? Of 3.5. But I know in the P world can be crazy, right? Like, hey, we'll buy it for 10 or 20 or 30 times, multiple of EBITDA, right? So, and that's net profit, everybody. So, is there that factor, right? No pun intended with exit factor. So, what are some of the dynamics that you're, measuring from a KPI standpoint?
Yeah, great question. And John, I think you mentioned earlier that some of the PE folks that give you a call, there are these cyclical trends, right? Where PE will get this like hot industry that they're really into right now. It's HVAC companies. So, commercial companies that are doing things like insulation and heating and cooling. That's a big hot item right now. And so the multiples, meaning the price that they'll pay times net income, is very high in PE. So you'll see this kind of trend for a couple years where if you sell your business in that time, you might be able to sell it for a lot more, but then that trend kind of fades away. So you can either catch that wave and maybe sell at a really high number, or maybe not. And then there's other things that happen, the economy and things like that. But ultimately, most industries tend to trend about the same over time. There's not usually these huge cycles and waves, and it's generally because of cash flow. It's how much can an owner predictably take home every year, meaning what can I know is recurring revenue, what can I know is risky in my operations, and what can I kind of predictably do to grow the business easily? Is it easy or hard to grow? So those are some of the things that owners think about. And every industry has a little bit of easier way of doing that. Some things are a little bit harder. So, manufacturing, once you've got a good foothold in the industry and you've got a really good foundation, you might get a really high multiple because you've put in the infrastructure to do that. But then in other industries, it's really easy to enter because anyone can go build an advertising agency. So it's just think about it when you're going to look at that. And that's kind of what drives multiples.
Multiples. Okay. So, and you mentioned manufacturing, right? So from a manufacturing business standpoint, and I know that, a lot of blue collar businesses are actually growing in value just because they're, supply and demand, right? Go back to the just natural economics of things, and we want to be able to bring stuff back to America with this new administration and those types of things. So there's a lot of desire, right? Oh, okay, this is interesting. But I will say, can you give us some insight on when you go into a company, and let's just say one company has a client that's 50 or 60 or 70% of their business of that, just for numbers sake, $1 million of revenue that they do. And then there's other companies that have 30 clients that make up the 100% of the revenue. Which one seems to have a little bit more leverage when you think about you sharing with them on how they can sell for a better value?
Yeah, great question. And the best way to think about it on any of these topics is imagine you're the new owner and someone just handed you the keys to the business. Now you take over that business and you see that I have one customer who's driving all of my revenue or a huge portion of my revenue. That's going to make me a little nervous because if for any reason that customer walks out the door, I've just lost a huge portion of my business. And then in your other example, I have 30 customers that are making up a healthy number of my business. And if any one customer disappears, I'm going to be safe. So yes, of course, I'll lose a little revenue, but I could probably make it up through the other ones. So I always try to think and coach people to think through that lens of a buyer, because if they take over tomorrow and something falls apart, then they're going to start to see that as risk. And it's the same thing in a vendor dependency too. If you have a vendor that's supplying a huge portion of all of your materials, that's a risk too, because if that vendor suddenly increases your prices or they disappear, then you might really be in a sticky situation. So these are some of the things that buyers think about, and it's really important to consider how to diversify away from if you're in a really concentrated position in terms of revenue or supply chain.
All right. So let's go back just a little bit because I think it's interesting that you chose Exit Factor. I'm assuming you vetted out a few of these franchisees or even thought about, hey, Erin Guthrie Incorporated, right? And because you had a lot of the data that you've already learned and your postgraduate degree and all that type of stuff. So what was one of the reasons that you looked at Exit Factor as kind of the brand that you wanted to stick with and go out into the market?
Yeah, great question. Well, a couple things. So, one of the reasons I really like Exit Factor is just that it has this proven global model. So, we're in 4 countries, we have 40 offices, and then we also have a sister brokerage firm called Transworld, which has been in business
Mm,
for a couple of decades. And they also have a huge footprint globally. So, the business was born out of this idea that um, the founder, Jessica Fialkovich, she was a broker herself and she had had a couple of successful exits in business. But as all these businesses were coming to her to try to sell, she realized, man, I really cannot sell some of these businesses and they need a little bit more help to get them over the finish line. And so now that she's scaled Exit Factor and we have this repeatable model that works to help companies measure the value up front, continuously measure over time, transform the business with these consistent approaches. That was really appealing to me because having come from, a strategy background, and then also just I liked the scalability of it to be able to kind of step into it right away. And I really just, again, like I said, like the mission of being able to help business owners. So I liked the ability then to connect it to the brokerage side too. And then so when we do have businesses that are ready to sell, we have our sister company right there that they can work with. And of course, they can work with anyone they want, but it's just nice to be able to have that umbrella and that like global presence.
so neat. So you bought into a franchise that also has an ecosystem that in many ways, when these brokers identify an opportunity, gentleman or female owner approaches them, but they're not exactly the right, timing, they can naturally just bring it over to you, right? With the relationships that you have with Transworld. So that's an interesting concept. Let me ask you, I guess, was there any adjustments, right? You were in the sell side of corporate, big dollars, big pocketbooks. You came with some probably some key conceived notions, right, of things that you kind of the way that you look at it. What was the hardest thing being in a franchise now and kind of assimilating to the process that Exit Factor enabled you to then start, grow the business? Or have you been flexible? Have you been able to incorporate the things that you learned from a corporate side?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the similarities. What's really interesting is the similarities in selling a business or acquiring a business that's $1 billion are actually very similar to a business that's $1 million because IP, ownership dependency, customer concentration, to your point, those things show up in the huge acquisitions as much as they do in the small acquisitions and sales. So that has actually been very consistent. And I think made it really easy to step in and kind of start working right away. And I think what's been different is just the level of independence, just to be able to kind of, go and build your own business and your brand. The nice thing about joining a franchise, though, and I guess maybe versus starting my own, Erin Guthrie Incorporated, is because I have come from a corporate world, I'm used to being able to have some centralized tools, some centralized teams and resources. And so the team that Exit Factor has been just really helpful. And providing us that runway and helping us get going, helping us have everything be really turnkey. So that for me has been amazing coming from a corporate background and just being able to get off the ground really quickly. And honestly, part of the reason why I wanted to join a franchise versus starting something on my own, just being able to hit the ground running has been incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and people that want to start a business, sometimes I actually ask them, "Hey, well, why not just buy a business, right? Like buy an existing
Right.
thing, buy a model, buy a system, right? System they say what save yourself time, energy, and money, right? So
Yeah.
it's certainly a big factor. So I guess when you started the business, right, you went through a process. Tell us kind of that journey, right? Do you have to apply and then, do interviews? Are they just, hey, if you're willing to do the franchise fee, you're in, type of thing. Are they vetting you out with your background? What were some of the reasons that Exit chose you?
Yeah, they're pretty selective. And I think the reason for that is because this industry is a bit technical in the sense that M&A does have a lot of different factors going around it, right? There's all of the transaction piece, there's understanding the competitive landscape, there's understanding the different players that come into the process, there's the financial aspect. So the successful owners that Exit Factor has seen usually have a little bit of background in something related to M&A or consulting. Not always. For example, sometimes an owner may have been someone who's successfully sold their own business before, and so they have great experience doing that. But just having been sort of in and around exiting businesses or M&A generally has been a good data point that they look for to help owners get off the ground running. So they did interview me. They had a pretty thorough vetting process. I think we met 4, 5, 6 times before we both kind of made that mutual decision, which made me feel really good because I felt like they invested a lot in the process. I invested a lot in the process. I did a lot of diligence on my own to talk to different owners, look at, all the different proof points they had in the market. And so by the time we actually both arrived at the decision to go forward in business, we'd each vetted each other, which I think is really great. And that's kind of how they've been doing it now, is just being really thoughtful and careful about who they choose, ultimately because they want people to be successful and grow the brand.
Sure. Now, is there a territory that you're kind of locked into, or are you able to go into the ecosystem, not only of Transworld, but maybe some other brokerage firms that you start to build relationships?
Yeah, yeah. So we can work anywhere in the country. I focus mostly on Chicago downtown because that's where my focus area is. But I have clients, all over the country. I have clients in Arizona, California, Texas. But my focus is Chicago downtown, meaning the Loop and the surrounding neighborhoods. That's my main area of focus.
Okay. And the size of the businesses, has that changed since the time that you opened the doors, or are you kind of consistently working with similar type size businesses?
Yeah, we work with anyone as low as 0 million in revenue, but ideally, I think our sweet spot is between 5 and 50 million in
Mhm.
revenue. And that really is because that's where we can add the most value in all those different levers that we can pull, helping owners get out of that dependency role, helping improve customer concentration, helping improve profitability, which tends to be a huge, huge driver of value. And so those are some of the areas that we spend the most time in, and that tends to be our sweet spot.
And on profitability, are you going from the top of the house of the balance sheet, or are you trying to see, within that expense model, like what areas, make most sense to maybe push those levers, over 3, 6, 12 months?
Yep, we go top to bottom from top of the balance sheet all the way down. But we first start with expenses because the philosophy is if you're spending too much upfront, you don't want to scale that expense, right? So
Mm.
we do a little exercise called "Is it necessary and is it working?" which I encourage every owner to do. If there's something that you're spending every month, is it actually necessary and is it working for your business? And we go through line item by line item and we really try to take out anything that doesn't meet that bar. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can save thousands and thousands of dollars on your P&L just by kind of re-looking at some of those things that you've been doing out of habit that may not really be adding any ROI. And so we're really rigorous with that up front so that owners can be thoughtful about their expenses and then try to scale anything that's not too large.
All right. So let me do. All right. So look, you're sharing a bit of the factors, right? Again, no pun intended. I love the name exit factor, right? Because it's so right to the point of what you're trying to deliver. So you bring someone on and they've gone through the ecosystem, maybe even visited a broker or had some challenging conversations, internally, but they're really needing that next step. So what does that look like from your perspective and your team? What are you guys looking to do in those first initial meetings?
Yeah. Well, we always start with what we call the diagnostic assessment. And that's really important because we want to understand the full picture of their business before we make any recommendation. Some owners come to us because they want to sell. Some owners come to us because they aren't sure. Some owners come to us because they want to grow and expand. So wherever they are in their journey, we start with that diagnostic. And what that really entails is going very deep operationally across 60 different dimensions: their supply chain, their owner operations, their team, their accounting, right? And really understanding all the practices they have in their business that, again, through that buyer lens, that could really impact their valuation that don't show up on a P&L. So that's the operational side of the diagnostic. And then we do the financial assessment, which is where we look outside at the market and we say, okay, every other business that looks just like yours, that is a similar size, similar amount of profit, that's recently sold in the past, 2 to 3 years. Here's what those companies have sold for. And here's about where you stack up in terms of where you fit in the middle. Are you kind of one of the best in class? Are you maybe a little bit behind? And then here's what we think your value could be. So we give that report to the owners and we kind of talk about, based on this diagnosis, here are some of the areas that we think are really strong. And we give them a risk score, call it the exit factor score. Basically, all that is out of 100 points, here are the things that you're doing really well that are outstanding. And here are some things that your peers might be doing a little bit better than you. And then also, here's your evaluation. And based on that, we give them a roadmap and we say, look, you can hold the business, do as is, do nothing. You can list it today and decide that you're really happy with this information and you love it. Or we can work on some things together to try to grow, improve profit, improve valuation. But it really is just a nice tool that gives the owner that view through the buyer's eyes and all the things that they're going to face in diligence, that they can then start to make decisions about how do they want to take the direction of the business and really build something custom that they can do next.
So do you go hand in hand once the evaluation gets done and the diagnosis comes back, you've got the real data to work with from a deep dive perspective? Is the intention of Exit Factor and your firm and your team to work hand in hand with them to maybe pick out 2 or 3 of the 60 data points and say, hey, these are the kind of the biggest levers. If you change these 3, your valuation could go up by, 15%, 35%, something like that. Is that a good way to think about it, or is there something different?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not going to try to tackle all 60. That's pretty unreasonable, but usually most owners will work with us for somewhere between 1 to 3 years. So we'll pick usually about 1 initiative per quarter. So of the 60, we'll pick maybe 1 per quarter or 1 per semester to work on, depending on how big that initiative is. So let's say it's profitability, that might take a couple of quarters to work on. Maybe if it's something smaller, it might take 1 quarter, and we'll spread it out. And we choose the ones that have the most material impact on the enterprise value. And meaning we know that based on all of the work that we've done with 1,500 businesses, if you improve these factors, it's going to increase your sellability. It's going to increase the dollars that you can sell for. So we really try to focus on that. And so when we give that readout of 62 things, we never recommend you should do all of these. We say, okay, here's the, 5 to 10 things that are going to really impact your score and move the needle the most. Here's the order in which we think you should do them so that you can start to improve the business. And then here's how we would sort of sequence it over the time that you've told us that you want to either exit or grow or achieve some certain goal by, and we kind of work around their schedule.
Okay. And so, just so I'm clarifying the question, do you guys literally work with them based on this
Yes.
engagement of 1 or 2 years? Are you smiling and dialing with them? Are you doing whiteboard sessions with them? Are you, calling vendors if that's one of the, data points? What are some of the things that do you become integrated within the business, I guess?
Yes, we do become integrated. And so it depends on how much the owner engages us. So some owners will really want to be more owner led, where they
Mhm.
ask for guidance and we give them the strategy, we give them the roadmap, and then they want to go implement it themselves. So we're really more of a accountability partner to them and helping them develop the strategy, the sequencing, the order, how to go execute these things. But they're ultimately sort of driving it. Most owners will engage us to be more of what you said, integrated into the team, meeting them weekly or bi-weekly, helping them develop, their standard operating procedures, helping them think about a new org structure, helping them design a new salesperson headcount so that they can be out of the business and not running all the revenue, right? And so those are some of the activities that we'll do, going through their expenses. Like I mentioned, that is it necessary? Is it working? So we'll really work hand in hand with the owners on all of these efforts. And a lot of times the reason owners will engage us to do that with them is because they're really busy. They're trying to run a business and they just do not have time or bandwidth to take this on. So they ask for our help to be integrated in their team and be kind of an extension of them to help them achieve what they need to get done.
All right, Aaron. So here's a mystery question, right? So,
Okay.
you know, you had a big team in corporate, and I always feel like this is so interesting, right? To go from a corporate side things, right, and the resources are plentiful, and you could take your time, right, and like you said, evaluate the buy side. But now you're on the sell side, and you're trying to, gauge it based on their timing and all that good stuff, and obviously limited resources. Was the beginning part of your franchise just you? And did you say to yourself, okay, hey, I'm going to need to bring on some talent, like myself to be able to expand the amount of clients that we could work with? Because it seems pretty intimate that, you would evaluate something and those larger percentage of owners that want to work with you and have you work with them hand in hand. There was only a certain capacity that you personally had. So what was the transition, or are you still at the point where you're kind of working these deals yourself?
Yeah, great question. And I've managed large teams and I really did feel that to scale this, I would need a team that could be very dedicated and very focused on clients so that the clients could get the most out of these engagements possible. Because to your point, to really be integrated, you need someone who understands the business, can be on the ground every day and get the full attention of the team. So I did actually hire 3 people that joined me right away.
Mm.
They're already on board. They're already working with clients. They're all fantastic. They each have a different background. One comes from a product marketing background in large marketing firms. One comes from investment banking. One comes from manufacturing and CFO space. So really unique and different backgrounds, and they're already kind of hitting the ground running. And then I have a 4th person joining me next month. So that's been amazing. It's just having the ability to kind of go in and scale right away and have those folks ramp up and then also be getting really to know the clients on a day-to-day basis. The clients can, of course, call me anytime, which they do, but then they also have their dedicated consultant that they can reach at any moment who knows the ins and outs of their business, who's driving the roadmap, driving all of the work together with them. And so that's been a huge part of scaling, I think, and super important. Yeah.
And what was the intentionality of that then? Obviously you came in with your own competencies and understanding, and you chose the brand just like it chose you. Um, was the first client from maybe some former companies that you thought of, or with this ecosystem of Transworld, was it kind of simple to be introduced to one or two opportunities that then you landed your first client? How did that work?
Yeah, I did. So one of my first clients was actually a friend, a family friend who
Mm.
had been wanting to exit. So that was actually a great first at bat. And that I think really parlayed itself into then meeting folks who are in the industry that do things like wealth management, commercial banking, and different investment banking, people who do areas that they touch clients that are in business for a long amount of time. And as I started meeting these folks, they really said, hey, I don't know how to help my client navigate this piece. I know that they want to exit at this number, but I don't know how to get them there. Would love your help. And then that's when the referrals really started coming in, and partnerships really started forming for me because I'm not a wealth manager. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a lawyer or estate planner. So for me, it's wonderful to also have people that I can trust and send my clients to help them get a great attorney or a great commercial banker or somebody that they can trust to help with their around their table of advisors. So that's kind of where we've been meeting a lot of our clients is through people that have these long-term relationships with their clients. The client is starting to think about, in 5 years, I'd really like to be on a sailboat somewhere in the middle of the ocean, the Caribbean. How do I get there? And they're like, maybe you should talk to Erin. And so that's kind of how we've been meeting a lot of folks, is just having those initial conversations, doing that diagnostic, and then the owner can really start reflecting on, all right, do I like this number? Is this a number I want to be wed to now? Or do I want to actually kind of spend a little bit more extra effort and try to get that number to be a bit bigger than maybe it looks right now?
Hmm. So that leads me to, what percentage of companies that you meet with are kind of satisfied that, you may initially say to them, hey, look, so in other words, do they have to have the diagnosis before you give them some sort of evaluation, I would think, or do they have a number and when you do the diagnosis, they may say, oh, well, it's exactly what I thought, and I don't want to grow to, again, the 1 million to 1.5 or 2.3 or something like that. What percentage of companies are kind of in that stalled mindset of like, hey, this is fine, which is, good for them, but maybe not something that's engaging to work with you?
Yeah, I'd say probably 10 to 15% are
Mhm.
okay with where they are. And that might be because of a number of factors. They're happy with where they are right now. They might be really far away from wanting to make change. Two, they just may not really want to have the mental bandwidth to kind of take on this transformation right now. But almost everyone really appreciates just having the information, even if they're not planning to make the transformation. And what we've seen is some of the clients that we met with earlier who said, I don't want to do this. I'm not ready. Now they're coming back and saying, actually, I
Mm.
do want to do this because I realized that thinking about it more, I'd really like to improve, the value and spend a little bit more time. And I've been able to free up some time. So, and we're really only asking owners for about an hour a week. We're not asking them for, hundreds of hours of time a month. Because we know people are busy and we know that it's a lot to take on. That's why we only do, one initiative a quarter, not five. So I think that's been the biggest area. But yeah, I definitely think that some owners will say, hey, this is great. I'm ready to sell. And I'm like, great, that's amazing. Let me kind of help you go get the right broker or the right attorney to help you think through that because we really just want our owners to be successful and we want them to achieve what they need. And so that's where we really spend a lot of.
So from a lens of just kind of looking at your business, right? For the GoFCO community, a lot of people, come to the channel to say, oh, I wish I could do this or start this type of business or run this type of scenario or what are some leadership qualities, all that type of stuff. So there's many different areas that we bring up. But from your perspective, as far as the revenue that you guys generate at Exit Factor and your franchisee, is it more important that initial engagement? Is that where the top revenue piece comes from, or is it more important for you to build an MRR scenario where you know that the engagement is going to be a year, 2 years, and there's a monthly recurring on that?
Yeah, we keep our diagnostic assessment at a pretty reasonable entry point price
Hmm.
because it's really a lead generation conversation starting tool. And we
Mm.
do that because it allows us to have a lot of conversations with owners, meet a lot of different businesses. And as I mentioned, sometimes a business will say, thank you for that. I'll see you never, but then they come back in 6 months. So for us, keeping that price point reasonable and approachable is important so that we can meet a large volume of businesses and keep conversations going. Where we really have most of our recurring revenue and most of the meat of our work, and frankly, where we add the most value is our consulting hours and our retainer. And that's that quarterly work where I mentioned where we're doing profitability transformation, operational diagnostic and doing standard operating procedures, sales processes, adding new growth levers. Those are the areas that are adding actual enterprise value to the business over the course of 1, 2, 3 years. So that's where we make most of our, overall revenue. And that's why we think about it that way, is kind of keeping the upfront costs low so that we can use it as a tool to bring clients in the door, help them just have information. And again, if they don't want to work with us now, that's totally fine. They might work with us later in the future. They might refer us to someone they know that is in a similar space. So it's just a great tool for us to have conversations and meet a lot of different clients that way.
Neat, neat. So would you say that supply or demand is probably the biggest challenge in your business? Meaning you have three talented people that you described in different competencies, and obviously you brought your own validation of things that you've done in the past, and you're bringing on possibly a new one coming on soon. So has the demand for your services been the challenge, or the supply of the talent to be able to execute and create that MRR or upfront fee been the biggest challenge?
There is a big There's no issue with either supply or demand. The biggest challenge is actually educating owners. Once
Hmm.
they understand the problem statement, meaning, oh, everyone exits. No matter what, everyone exits their business, whether or not you sell it, transition it to another employee, transition it to a son or daughter, close your doors. No matter what, everyone exits. So, how do you want to exit? Once owners actually grasp that statement, everyone wants to do a diagnostic. But there's no, the problem is that before you educate folks, they don't understand that they need that, because people hear the word exit and they think, oh, you're making me want to sell my business. I don't want to sell my business. Oh, I'm not going to exit. I'm only 50 years old. I'm going to be doing this for 20 more years.
Mhm.
And nothing will ever happen to me. I'm going to be living until I'm 100 years old. That's totally fine. And so people avoid the topic because they don't think about it as creating optionality. But once you get their eyes open to thinking about, I'm actually just creating options for myself and increasing wealth opportunities for myself, that's when the light bulb comes on and everyone really realizes, I actually do need this. And I'd love to know, what is my business worth? What are the risks in my business? And just have that conversation, because then I can make choices about how do I want to plan my future and my wealth. And it's not about exiting, it's about creating options. So that's more of the supply demand issue. It's less supply and demand, is more of an education problem. Yeah.
Oh, the educational curve. Inside I swelled up a little bit because I was laughing because I sold life insurance for a while, and I would always say, "Look, everybody's going to die." Like, and you may not want to talk about it, but that's the reality, right? So, you have three kids, or you're about to get married. You're going to have this debt that you put on the mortgage, and all these things for most people, right? Not everybody's completely flush with cash. So it's a similar thing, right? Yeah, you're 100%. You will exit your business. How you do that is very important for you to decide and control, and have a relationship with Erin and the Exit Factor team, because like you said, it's choices, it's understanding, and gosh, the hardest part of seeing someone having worked their whole life, as we said in the intro in the hook, is sad to see then when they get hit with a situation. And that's life sometimes, right? Is we all get hit with, God forbid, a disease or, the economy, and all that type of stuff. But it's an interesting factor. And I love that throughout this whole podcast has been factor or exit or factor. So exit factor. Right? So really awesome stuff. So, all right. Well, look, we've talked about the scaling model, right? It sounds like you're about to bring on another talent. You've got the supply and demand, you've got the education, you've got an ecosystem. It's really cool with Transworld and Exit Factor kind of ecosystem, but you do go outside of that. And then you've got all these other people that you really do business with, attorneys and accountants and people that can bring you business and commercial bankers and all that type of stuff. So I guess what's beyond that, is there a marketing strategy that you currently have incorporated? Does the franchisor give you a model? Have they been able to, give you certain things that also bring in an ecosystem of revolving leads and stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah. The franchise does do a lot of like broad marketing, from what I would call, broad branding and presence down to then the local level of sort of targeted advertising. And that's helpful because, as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges with exit planning is that owners don't know what it is or why it's important. Or they might know what it is, but they don't think to do it until the last minute. I can't tell you how many of my business owners are actually folks that have waited until almost the sort of final hour, and now we're kind of scrambling to get something together, and they all say they wished they had started 1 year, 2 years earlier, right? So it's not that owners don't know that it's important, it's that they wait till a little bit too long. So most of the marketing that we do is actually educational, getting people to come to workshops, getting people to understand why it's so important to come in earlier and think about this when you're young, when you're healthy, when you don't have a life event, just like you do maybe with your wealth strategy. You put in a little bit of seed money in the beginning, you start working with a wealth advisor, and you have a long-term plan for your retirement. Very similar idea, is just what's your long-term plan for your business? How do you want to think about that? So that's really where we spend a lot of our time with marketing is education, getting people into workshops, spending time with them one-on-one, spending time with them in sort of these settings where they can learn, because it is one of the more complicated topics that people haven't really spent a lot of time knowing about. So that's where we spend a lot of our marketing energy.
I always want to say, darn human beings, we're always so emotional about stuff, and things, right? And hard-headed too, right? Like I said, I had that reference of life insurance and things like that. It's really interesting, even as a commercial banker for my day to day, working with clients to say, hey, even a line of credit, knowing that there will be bumps in the road to access capital that you're not, maybe you don't have a ton of retained earnings. If your EBITDA percentages, right, or your margins aren't that strong, set up a line of credit, right? It just doesn't make any sense not to. But I agree. Education can be one of those trailing factors that really kind of influence. Now, from a hat of a business owner that had corporate, background, from a, let's say like a paycheck mentality, right? An employee mentality. What's been the biggest difference of knowing that, hey, on Friday, I don't get paid unless I've done some work the last month. So just we'll tackle that. Give us a little bit of the insights of what's been the hardest thing, or some of the things that you've adjusted to pretty quickly on that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, when you're an entrepreneur, you definitely feel that what you deliver is what you earn, of course. And so I find it very rewarding because, one, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I really enjoy that feeling of success. But then, of course, there are roller coaster moments. And I think any entrepreneur can relate to this, where you might have something that you feel like, oh, I'm going to close this big deal, or I'm going to have this big success. And then that person says, oh, you know what, I need a little more time, or I'm not ready. And you're like, oh, it fell through the cracks. So that can be disappointing. And, you have these ups and downs sometimes. But I think if I look over, I guess, a broader time, I try to take a longer term view and not look at just the week to week, because some weeks will be good. And some weeks I'm like feeling like, oh, okay, I'm on top of the world. Some weeks I'm like, oh, that wasn't a great week. I didn't maybe achieve everything I wanted to achieve. But if I try to look over, many months or many weeks, I can see that the trend is going up and that, we're getting a lot of traction and they're having a lot of success. So try to stay focused on that, because that makes me, I think, have a better perspective.
No, it's interesting, right? I mean, when you go from that corporate world to entrepreneurship, we didn't touch much on funding, but I'm assuming, did you bootstrap this thing or did you
Yeah.
have some sort of joint effort with the franchisor of investment into it? What was some of that just quick dynamic?
Yeah, I bootstrapped. I mean, I invested my own money,
Mm.
which was, but again, coming from corporate, I'm very fortunate to have had that runway to have done that, right? 15 years of corporate salary and stock options and things like that. I think that afforded me the ability to then give myself some runway to do this and give myself a couple years to ramp up a business. So I do feel very fortunate and grateful that I've had that time. And I am doing that. I think it's important that, for anyone starting out, that you can give yourself that grace to not expect that you're going to reach that corporate level in 6 months, 12 months. It's going to take some time to build. And knowing that you can do it, it's just going to be it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to, you know, require a different type of effort and energy. So, yeah, I've been happy with the pace, and I know that it's going to be some days, like I said, will be really great. Some will be not as much and a little more cyclical, not as much, every 2 weeks that guaranteed paycheck anymore, but definitely way more rewarding.
I love it. I love it. And that's the go for CEO mentality, right? It's driven by mindset. I wrote this book called the 4A Formula. And I love that, the beginning part of diagnosis is like chapter one, assess where you're at, right? The alignment is you've got attorneys, commercial bankers, CPAs, business brokers. You align yourself with the right people and that brand of exit factor to bring you some of that, competency and structure and build out and these types of things, and along with your own competency that you bring in, now you just took accountability, right? It's your baby. You got to grow it. And last one is you took action. So I love the kind of similarities, and that's why I'm proud of the book that I wrote to be able to kind of mesh in between these segments of podcasts and things that we all do in this interesting world we called business, right? So from a day to day. So all right, in the Go for CEO channel, we like to end with CEO. So client experience, E is for engagement, and I'll kind of prep you on that one. And O is for operational excellence. I know that we didn't touch this, but I'm very curious how AI is playing in your world and some of the diagnosis that you're doing. But the first one is client experience. So from a 60-second, let's say, value proposition, Erin Guthrie, right, on the testimonial with your hand on the Bible, like type of thing. What is the client experience that you expect people to come through when they do business with Exit Factor Chicago?
The client experience that I hope people receive is that they're going to get a very high degree of empathy, because I know how much people care about their businesses. It's like a child, and I'm a parent.
Mm.
So I very much understand how much I love my children. And I'm also a business owner and I love my business. And so you need a high degree of empathy. But also with me, you're going to get very good directness. I will never, skirt around the truth. I will never, sugarcoat, because it's very important that business owners get the information firsthand. And the reason for that is if they don't hear it from me, they're going to hear it at the deal table and they're going to lose money. So I want them to hear it directly from me first. So that's a client experience that I hope people get.
Awesome, awesome. And I know we didn't get too personal, but you just mentioned being a mom. It's so cool that people could listen to this. You're a mom entrepreneur and someone that made a decision to go corporate to entrepreneurship. But the E is for engagement. So, and this is such a cool question in my mind because I love hearing from people that say, well, John, the best way to engage with me is I love a great meal. I'm Italian, I like food, that type of thing, or something like that. Or hey, I like to go to sporting events, or I like to do concerts, or I just like to write a note, right? I like to receive a note from someone or give a note. Like, so this, question is answered differently from everybody. But if you think about Erin Guthrie, the person that you've become over the X amount of years you've been on this earth and the experiences that you've had, What is the best way to engage with Erin?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day, and I had lunch with someone that I didn't know very well. And we had this great lunch. We talked about our kids, and this person had a student in college and that child's ambition of what they want to do with their career. So I think the best way to engage with me is just getting to know me personally. And I love getting to know other people personally, maybe over a coffee or lunch or a drink. And then I want to know, just all about you and what your goals are. I think that's a great way to engage.
Okay, that's fair. I love it. Any specific thing like dinner, or you like to do a coffee? Are you a coffee
Yeah,
drinker?
coffee. Coffee's
Okay.
great. I love a coffee. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any specific place you like? Give them a little shout out.
Ooh, I love Intelligentsia. They have great coffee.
Ooh, Intelligentsia. That sounds cool. That's downtown Chicago.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I like that favorite place. I just went to a place called Kinsley the other day. It's interesting. It's right on I think I forgot what it was, but I always get lost downtown. I'm a Chicago kid through and through all my life, but I'm definitely a suburbanite. So in that
There's so
sense,
many new places popping up all the time too. It's like there's a coffee place here and then a coffee place there. You really can't go wrong.
yeah, it's interesting. So, all right, the last one is operational excellence. And I know that we didn't touch necessarily on this incredible trend that's going on. I know offline, I told you about a client that is working on some workflow automation with AI agentic scenarios. What are the tools that Exit Factor brought to you so that you didn't have to guess on the tech stack that you're using? You didn't have to worry about, oh, the phone system that you use. Like, what are some things that you're using in your day to day, or even that you're implementing, be it say with AI or something like that?
Yeah. So coming from the tech world, it came from 15 years at large technology
Mm,
companies. I have a very high bar for what I'll use in terms of AI because I want to make sure that anything I use actually delivers ROI. And I think there's a lot of noise out there right now. But I will say, I think AI is incredibly good at research. And of course, you have to have some oversight and make sure it's, got high quality. But for example, sometimes we can use it to look at the client's competitive landscape, understanding who else is out there, understanding some of those trends and things like that. So research, understanding what are the trends that are happening in the market in terms of different competitors, different trends in the supply chain has been a very valuable way of using it. And then in terms of our tech stack, we have, I think, what you would call like a traditional CRM, where you can send out, marketing emails and things like that. I think that's another great way to use AI is kind of understanding sentiment and how to nudge people through your funnel and things like that. There's a lot of really good innovation coming in there, moving people from the top of the funnel, nudging them through and giving them better and more insightful marketing type email or interaction. So those are some things that I'm seeing in AI that I think are executed well. There are some things that I think in AI that are not executed well. And I think it's always important for any owner, any CEO to just, as you're using these AI tools, being really thoughtful about, is this delivering value or is this, causing noise? And that's the lens that I always use. And so far, those have been some of the things that I've found really to have good ROI for our business.
yeah, I love that. Does it deliver value or cause noise? Right, because shiny object syndrome is real, right?
Right.
And my sister-in-law's former CHRO of a pretty multi-billion-dollar company, and her son is at Georgia University. And I was just talking to her about some of the things that I'm working on, and she said, I'm telling Jack, our nephew, to really concentrate. If you can come out of college and be that resource that you just said of signal over noise, and develop that mindset and understanding of these tools. Because I think, like, even from the world that you came in or came from, M&A, PE, these guys are like, it's like 15 different things a
Right.
minute. Like, oh, that's new. Oh, that went out of business, or this, so it's an interesting time that we live in. But like you said, an Exit Factor itself, did it give you a templated already tech stack of stuff too, just to kind of go back a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they
All right.
did give us a templated tech stack, which is really helpful. So all of our website and all of our marketing tools, all of our other internal tools were on a given tech stack. So that was given to us, which is great. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we
And
have an internal, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, and I was just saying, I'm commenting to the community. If you're listening to this, that's the beauty of buying a franchise or buying into a franchise is you don't have to think about those 7 other hats that most business owners, start off with, right?
Yes, yes, that was another reason. I mean, I mentioned I'm a parent. I have 2 young children. I think that was a huge appeal of buying a franchise too, is just let me put aside some of the things that are more challenging that I don't know. I am not a web designer. I am not an IT person, but I am good at understanding business strategy and M&A. So let me focus on that and outsource kind of, these other elements of marketing and IT to the franchise who already has this system built in and is basically turnkey. That was really appealing to me so that I can focus on being a mom, having good work-life balance and delivering the work that I, have experience doing. That was a huge appeal. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Don't mess with Mama Bear, right? So awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin, for being a part of the Go for CEO channel. What are some of the ways that are best suited to get a hold of you? DMing on LinkedIn, email? What's kind of the best way to interact when someone sees this episode?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Erin Guthrie, or you can email me, Erin.Guthrie, Guthrie, at exitfactor.com. Drop me a line. Happy to chat.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, like I said earlier, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, be a subscriber, become a part of the community. Go for CEO brand. We also, on our newsletter on my personal profile on LinkedIn, just unveiled the 4A Leadership Boardroom. So we're doing some surveys for the next couple of weeks and trying to find out if you have an interest in the boardroom that we're opening up. And last one is order the book, the 4A Formula. Untangle any challenge and think like a CEO. You got great people like Erin Guthrie on this channel, sharing her corporate side to the entrepreneur side, being a mom, and all the other things that are real life things and challenges, and building an incredible business that she is. So thank you so much for being a part of the Go for CEO channel, Erin.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. It's been such a pleasure.